Okay, so we are live again from the lovely Into the Hills here in Kerrville, Texas with Matrix Mash Live. Let's go. Now, we could turn that camera around today and show you the happy faces, but camera's stationary. And we're just going to kind of leave it that way. Emily, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We're just going to kind of wait around and hang out. And this is obviously a surprise to probably a lot of people that are watching this. Well, not here, but oh, they're doing a show. Oh, maybe we'll show up. But whether it's live or recorded, oh,
she's here.
Kestrel's here. Hey, Kestrel. Maybe you could phone your friend Ani to show up.
Joe Dimitri, here we go.
Joe Dimitri. Okay, so we're populating now.
Yeah.
So what do you think so far?
So this has been really fun. I'm excited to do. I think in our early days of Matrix Mash, we live streamed a few times, but this is actually the first time we're doing it live in front of the audience and really with guests, with multiple guests. And we've had a guest one time before on Matrix Mash,
right? And
this is the first time we'll be doing it with guests.
Who was our guest? Was it Freeman?
It was Freeman, and right. That was the only. I think we live streamed. That was the only time I think we live streamed. I think other than that, we've always done pre-recorded. So
that was a very interesting live stream because I was at Whole Foods, and I was like on the roof of Whole Foods or something, trying to get their Wi-Fi signal. It was bitter cold, and then I wound up going downstairs into the eating area of Whole Foods. It was really noisy. It was just technically a very difficult show to do. But we got people now. We got people. There's our friend Christine.
We've got a lot of people here.
And Frank.
Yeah.
And
Hi,
Z.
Christine. Hi, Maurice. Jennifer, Maya, Z.
Yeah,
Atlas, everybody's filling in now.
Here we go.
Even at the last minute, we can throw a party, dude.
That's right. It's like the old rave scene in England. Totally. they had the beepers.
Yeah.
Just like, here it is. Here's a location. Bang, go.
Yeah. We're starting in 5 minutes. Get there.
And it's kind of, I think reality's going to be that way. Moving forward.
Yeah, you can't plan it.
You can't. I mean, it's sort of like, oh, well, you can't. You've been deplatformed. There's no more free speech. It'll be like pirate radio. Like getting your message across will be like pirate radio. It's kind of exciting. It's like a real underground. So I'm looking forward to that, actually.
Absolutely.
I'd rather go mainstream, but in lieu of that, I'm happy for that. We got Steven here.
Hi, Steven. Sally. Dahlia.
Yeah.
Misinformed in motion.
Misinformed in motion.
Pen greedy.
So, yeah, it's starting to happen. So what do you think of the weekend so far, Emily?
So it's been really fun. Misaki's presentation was really good today. You were great. It's really cool to see it ever again. All the people I met last year, and we have a few newcomers this year, and that's been cool. The weather is really nice, and just it's really different than Los Angeles energy-wise for me right now. So it's been kind of cool to we go places and people aren't it's kind of cool. Some people are wearing masks, some people aren't, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for either one that the other isn't doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I like that. I don't have a problem with someone wanting to wear a mask, because don't tell me I have to.
That's kind of a Texas thing, I have to say. If you're wearing a mask, it's I don't really hassle the mask wearers, only in my head. But they generally leave you alone. Well, they leave me alone. But I've seen them kind of hassle other people occasionally. But by and large, it's pretty respectful.
I did get accosted by a Mask Nancy at Central Market, though. I call them Mask Nancy's.
Mask Nancy's.
At Central Market the other day, because I stepped about 3 inches off my green square in the checkout line.
Really?
Can you stay a little further away from me? And then she was like, "It's not just me; it's the rules." I'm like,
"It's the rules."
It's the rules. I'm not much for rules. I've never had.
No,
yeah.
Not been a rule person.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, good. Everybody's feeling groovy. Everybody's having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do today is a little bit of a different format. I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to play MC. And what's going to happen is we have a room full of people, each of which has a unique talent and skill set. And we're going to tap on some of the expertise in this room, and hopefully they'll be able to give us some insight into where they are or where their field is. We've got people from transportation, architecture, arts and entertainment, environmental sciences, big pharma in general, publishing. We've got an astrologer is going to chime in. So there's a number of really interesting guests we're going to bring your way, and they're theoretically everyday people, just like you and me, or just everyday people, but they'll have an opportunity to bring what they know to the table. And quite often we're bombarded with experts, right? And really, how much expert are they? I mean, how much expertise in the world really is there at this point in time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're gonna flip the tables a little bit and be able to bring some other people up and have them tap in. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hear, all these people hear from you and I all the time.
Yeah.
So I think this will be an interesting experience for me to get to hear something back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
right.
They're all familiar with the show and how it goes. So
Yeah.
we'll keep some of that, but hear what they have to say.
Yeah. So so I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to bring some people up, and you're going to mash.
All right.
All right,
Sounds
let's go.
good.
Let's go. All right. Here we go.
Will Steve Guest please come to the microphone?
It's the voice of God, it's the voice of Robert technology instead of the voice of God technology. Hi, Steve.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good.
Nice to see you. Welcome to Matrix Mash. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am a recently retired architect.
Okay. What kind of architect?
I was a principal in a regional firm in the Bay Area, California. Our specialty was mostly office and industrial. We're private sector guys. We don't do schools, prisons, hospitals. Our specialty was probably mostly the private sector.
Okay.
So we do a lot of building of work environments for technology companies. We do a lot of office interiors and workplace interiors and that sort of thing. So
Cool. So
and I'm not doing it anymore.
you just retired.
Just retired.
So can you tell me, from the time, just in a sort of brief summary, from the time that you really got your start in that industry to where it is when you left, what kind of evolution that you saw through
Oh
that?
God, that's gonna
And then
make
we'll
me
move into
sound
what
old.
you see coming. Yeah.
Well, my first job was in for a very famous architect in New Haven, Connecticut, and I was a slave labor over a drafting table with pencils and pens, and the two people on either side of me chain smoked in the office.
Uh-huh.
The fax machine had just been invented, and we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And there was no FedEx yet, so the pace of the process was, much slower.
So fast forward to kind of where you went with your career and where things were at. You're building office environments, and one of the main things that happened during the course of your career is the rapid advancement in technology.
Oh yeah.
So I imagine that changed the way that you built structures, obviously, and then and then also had to alter structures that you had previously built. And to the point that I'm sure in the last few years, you're dealing with buildings that are becoming actually part of the interactive technology as opposed to just housing them, correct?
Well, that and, the politics of building, equity in the workplace and gender neutrality and how do you design a bathroom. And,
Yeah.
the workplace has evolved probably 4 or 5 times in my career.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, it was Don Draper in his office, and who was the gal who was his secretary?
Chrissy?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There were 4 or 5.
Yeah,
That was,
yeah.
and she had an IBM Selectric with a ball on it.
Yeah.
And, now, our last Google project was, this big rooms of desking systems and, people touching down with their personal laptop and, connecting into meetings electronically. And the office is no longer a specific space for doing business. It's more or less an environment to help people be creative. So
Yep.
you get your food, you can be entertained, you can play ping pong, you can go down a slide, you can get your laundry done, you can get your poodle washed. Everything is there.
Can I come over?
Well, that's the idea. It's everyone realizes that the office is a recruitment tool for talent, and Apple is right next to Oracle and Google, and they're all fighting for the same mine. So
Yeah.
whoever presents the best package and the coolest place to work usually wins.
So you're from Northern California, correct?
Yes. Well, I actually, we live in Sacramento.
Yeah.
We have a Sacramento office and we have 2 Bay Area offices, San Jose and San Francisco.
Right.
So, and those are very different offices than the Sacramento office because there's no Googlers in Sacramento yet.
So is there also, because I've heard a lot of rumors that a lot of that San Francisco tech industry is going to be relocating to Reno. So are you starting to see movement in that direction as well?
Well, in the last 6 months, everyone has figured out that you can work remotely.
Yeah.
And the next year will be a complete metamorphosis of the office environment. And it's going to completely overturn the real estate industry.
Mm-hmm.
WeWorks right now is suing all of their landlords for little tiny increments of leftover tenant improvement allowance that they can try to claw back because they're screwed. You know, they have all this space that nobody really wants to use now. And they always do short-term leases. We were doing 4 projects for Google 6 months ago. They all stopped. One of them is starting up again. But our office closed. We all went remote. We figured out we could do it. It was actually a very easy transition. We're just now coming back into the office. And the interesting thing is that in our neighborhood in Sacramento, 2 people from Apple, Apple couples have moved to our neighborhood because and to drive to the Bay Area from Sacramento during non-rush hour is about 1 hour and 40 minutes, but rush hour could be 5 hours.
Yeah.
So, but they work from home.
Yeah.
And they can't. My sister lives in Mountain View.
Yeah.
She moved there in 1972. She bought a house for $40,000. Today it's worth $2.5 million.
Yeah.
It's insane. And you know, right now you've got seven millennials living in one of those houses and sharing the rent.
Yeah.
So the thought of coming to Sacramento and buying a house for, you know, a mere $700,000 is, you know, to them is like, so what'll happen to Sacramento eventually is what happened to San Francisco 2 or 3 years ago when Salesforce blew it up. And they'll just price everybody else out. So it's this migration of, you know, overpaid tech entrepreneurs sort of moving all over the place.
Do you think that the office is going to go away completely in the next period of time? Do you think we'll ever see office life again the same way?
Well,
we saw it before?
the office has gone away already.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when we design a space today, it's not an address for you to put your stuff. I mean, a lot of places that we design, you have a locker, a foot locker, and a little, you know, a dog cart that you pull around with your personal belongings, and you can pick an address. You come to a concierge in the morning, you sign in, you pick an address, you go there, you plug in your phone and your laptop, and the technology routes, they're all to that address day. You're on the road again.
And does the same dog cart bring your poodle over to to get washed inside the office?
Sure.
What happened to those great marriage-ending office affairs now?
I'm sure they still happen.
Yeah. Sounds a little like the Jetsons.
Well, you know, I fished off the company. I met Claire.
Yeah,
She
good
was
score, yeah.
She was my boss's administrative person.
Yeah.
And you know, he hated me because I wouldn't talk to her in the office. So she finally left, and he came out and, you know, Steve, did you cause that to happen? You
Can I
know?
tell you something weird?
What?
So your wife was in my dream a few weeks ago, but not actually her name. I woke up from my dream and her name was like, it was like the first thing that came out of my mouth. It was the weirdest thing. It was just like, I'm dreaming about Claire Guest, but she wasn't there. It was just her name. It was very bizarre. I told her too. I typed it in the chat, you know, the next day because it was like so interesting. I don't know her very well, but it was just right there on the tip of my tongue. So yeah, obviously if she could, just her name can show up in my dream. She's a special gal. Yeah. So can I ask you a weird question? Can I get a little weird like I do?
Yeah.
So I read this, we obviously see all these like dystopic or weird technological kinds of television series like Westworld and all this kind of stuff. But I read a really good book this past year called Inside the Earth by Radu Sinamar. And it talks about sort of a different kind of technology that exists in some of these realms inside the earth. And one of the things that was in there was that like you would get on this train, and in the train, the windows of like the subway, like the windows would turn into computers that told you about the place that you were going. But it wasn't like a screen came down. It was like the window suddenly became the screen. You're building office spaces for high-tech companies like Google and stuff like that. Have you seen any technology that is like this, where actually the technology is built as part of sort of the architecture, the glass, the steel, the cement, or anything like that?
Well, it's coming.
It's coming.
Oracle they have offices everywhere, and they're champions of they kind of pioneered video conferencing. And they created, this is old technology, but they created these telepresence rooms, which were so good that you could sit at the table and feel like the person on 1,000 miles away was sitting at the end of the table with you. And it was all done with cameras and sound, very elaborate sound systems and that sort of thing. And environmentally, offices are changing with sound masking and all kinds of large graphic displays. I mean, the modern tech workers is nothing like the traditional office worker anyway. I mean, you just go to see one of those spaces and it's like you landed in Mars.
Yeah. Robert told me the other day that we might be living on Mars, so that's entirely possible.
Well,
and Groupon sells an acre of land on Mars for, you can buy a coupon for that on Groupon. Yeah. So is there anything really cool and exciting going on? When I say cool and exciting, I mean stuff that like we would all find really neat that is going on in that industry that we're not aware of, because it's not our domain.
So there's sort of three realms in architecture. There's the academic realm, people that teach. There's the practitioners, and then there's the politicians. Yeah. And we get along with each other. We don't often, Rod and I are both practitioners, so we don't spend a whole lot of time in academia, and I try to duck under the political scene. But architects always sort of fashion themselves as problem solvers and storytellers. Yeah. So we tend to absorb the burden of trying to solve the world's problems all the time. Architects have been working very hard on, global warming issues for a long time.
Right.
So when AOC comes out and flies around the country in a jet, making a huge carbon footprint, lecturing us about the Green New Deal, we kind of smirk a little bit because, at least in California, we've been working on that problem since the 70s. Yeah. And in the 10 or 15 years ago, we created the U.S. Green Building Council, and it's a whole new measure of how you design sustainable buildings. Yeah. And there's a point system, but then they did what every big bureaucratic agency does. They built a really expensive, fancy building in Washington. Right. So when their whole program got absorbed into the building code, they went, no, we can't do that. We can't let you do that. It's going to have to continue as a more complicated process. Right. So they started creating social equity portions of the whole design, metric and things like that. Right now, there's a 2030 challenge, which is a little bit different than the 2030 plan that everyone else is talking
agenda,
about. The agenda. And maybe it's part of it. We don't know.
Probably, yeah.
But the point of it is, the built environment accounts for probably 50% of the carbon in the world. Yeah. And so it's a big target, and it's an easy target. It's pretty easy to fix. So the 2030 challenge, and actually the president of my firm is the chapter leader in San Francisco, is to be all buildings to be carbon neutral by 2030 and use 50% less water resource and 50% less transportation energy to get there. So there's a whole bunch of fairly smart people working on plans to try to implement how you restructure the urban environment to accommodate that.
And is that all this stuff we're seeing where it's like apartments on one level and businesses on the other level and things like that, part of it?
Well, a lot of it is how you redefine the new urbanism of the 21st century. Yeah. If we keep expanding the urban services boundary to build more and more suburbs, which require more and more distance travel. Yeah. The common thinking is that's not good.
Yeah.
But the new paradigm now is we don't have to work we don't have to go to an address to work.
Right.
Maybe we go in once a week for a meeting or a staff meeting, but maybe we can become more
lateral instead of everything
dispersed.
vertical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I think culturally, mankind works better in urban environments.
Yeah.
Until recently. As long as we don't burn it down, we get along better, and we have more to do, and we get better in interaction, and we're not sitting in our bedrooms.
It's good to be
on our
around
laptops.
people.
Yeah.
It's good to be around people, even the ones that irritate you sometimes.
Yeah. Although Claire and I are trying to get out into the woods right now. I served my time.
Yeah, you served your time. All right, now you've also served your time here, so thank you,
Okay.
Steve. Nice chatting with you.
That's good. Thank you, Steve. Let's see. Where's spinning stuff? Where's Jennifer? Come on.
Step
We're
right
just
up.
going to call her Jennifer.
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Hi.
How you doing? Nice to see you.
Good. Good to see you.
All right, so tell us a little bit about this is Jennifer, and
Yeah.
what do you do? I know that you've worked in pharma. Yeah.
Actually, I work in healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay.
I've been a nurse for 20 years.
Okay.
And I work I do a lot of different things. I work in quality, patient safety. I do investigations when people die, when you have bad outcomes in the hospital. And I look to see if the physician was the cause of the problem or if the nursing staff was the one who caused the problem. And I've been doing that for probably about 9 years. But I think what I've seen change recently, really within the last 8 years, healthcare has become extremely data-driven.
Yeah.
And it is all about outcomes, the physician outcomes and nursing outcomes. It's how the providers and the hospital get paid.
Uh-huh.
So this program has been around for a while, since 2012, and you'll probably hear more about it, but it's called value-based purchasing.
Just curious, like I just did a show with Sophia Smallstone
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this, about like there is a market for betting on outcomes, and so it isn't just about steering it towards a certain outcome based on like a company's desired thing. There's also people literally betting on it. It's part of what I forget what the term that she used. She was referencing a woman named Alison McDowell, who's written a lot about this. Are you aware of what I'm talking about?
No.
We're talking about two different values, like a value, economic value versus a social value. Is that what you're talking
So
about?
it's basically like there's like going to be a number of outcomes that are possible for a scenario, right?
Right.
And there's some that are like preferred, like in general, but also just like the people can do weird stuff with like shorting
Yeah.
the market. Like there'll be like people who are betting on a particular outcome, and so even if that isn't the one that's actually the most desirable, that's the one something will be steered for if there's somebody who's important stands to make a lot of money from it that way, as opposed to just from their company being involved in the project. So both things will be happening, if I'm understanding correctly what Sophia was saying. So
Okay.
but when you just started talking about it, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah. Okay. So this is different.
Okay.
This is your provider or the hospital is going to get paid based on how well you do as a patient. So one thing I think people need to think about moving forward is biometrics and biostatistics, because what we're doing now is we're creating profiles on people.
Mhm.
And so, I can see if you are filling your prescriptions. I can see if you're, going to the pharmacy every 30 days, you're picking up your blood pressure medicine. I'm going to have your weight. I'm going to have your vital signs. I'm going to have your family history.
This is what she was talking about. Yeah, yeah, she was talking about that in combination with the other thing. But yeah, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So I would have the ability to build a profile on you. And there's certain things that I'm going to know based on research, or I can kind of predict how well you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, a lot of people know that elderly single men don't do as well as others after surgery. Okay, part of this value-based purchasing program, it looks at a lot of different things. One of them is readmissions.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you go into the hospital and you come back in 30 days for an unplanned readmission, number one, the hospital is
Unplanned, you said? Unplanned readmission.
Number one, the hospital is going to get deemed, and we're not going to get paid.
Okay.
Okay, so if we use the analogy of a car, I mean, this isn't happening now, but this is
Where it's
looking
going.
forward.
Yeah.
Okay, if I own a car shop, okay, you bring your car in. You don't change your oil. You don't rotate your tires. You drive the hell out of it. You throw your trash in your car. I mean, it's
like
trash.
I do.
Okay, if you come into my car shop,
Yeah.
Why do I want to check your car if there's a good chance in 30 days that you're going to be back and I'm not going to get paid?
Yeah.
At all. I mean, why would I want to take your car on? I would say somebody else take Emily's car.
Yeah.
I'll pass. So moving forward, I think people really need to recognize that, I mean, we're going to have to be accountable for our health and learn how to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
Because I think the options are going to be limited moving forward. And there's a lot more conversation now about end-of-life care.
Yep.
And there's a lot of resources being put into end-of-life care. So kind of the days of in the hospital setting that we pulled out all the stops to save your life, that's coming to a close.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resources being put into we need you to make the decision for your loved one to go into hospice. We need it to happen fast. Like, we're not going to
Was the
sit
COVID
around.
thing kind of a run up?
I was just going to ask that question. My next question to you was going to be, how much was this period of time with coronavirus a data gathering exercise about how you want to roll that out? And also to try, to sort of shock the system by seeing so many decisions like that having to be made so quickly, right? Like, you had this situation where people were going into the hospital with flu symptoms and not coming out, and decisions were having to be made, going to be intubated, not. It felt almost like this was there to shock the system, to either roll something new out or to gather information for something that's planning to be rolled out.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of, especially with the end of life stuff, that's been, I guess, kind of a slow burn. We've been talking about it, but there wasn't, they weren't putting tons of resources into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say over the last couple of years, there have been more, because mortality is one of the value-based purchasing programs. So if our hospital has a high mortality rate, we get deemed.
So you don't want them to die there. You want them to die anywhere else but there.
Okay. If
Gotcha.
you die in hospice, that death does not count against the hospital. So if you die in the hospital bed, we take the hit.
Gotcha.
But if we get you into hospice, then it's excluded, so to speak. And
is that, just out of curiosity, you don't think any of that's going on now, and that could possibly explain why they were so insistent on sending the old folks back to the old folks home as opposed to treating them in the hospital?
I don't know.
Because that sounds to me like a similar thing.
It sounds like they're farming them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Administratively, you would not want all of those people dying in your hospital.
Live exercise. That sounds, yeah.
And because, you're going to take the financial hit for that. So the way that the system works is, and it depends on a hospital size, At the beginning of the year, we have to give CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, about $1 million. And over the year, we try to earn that money back. And one or two things, well, three things can happen. You can either break even and get your $1 million back. If you have good outcomes, you can make money. If you have bad outcomes, you actually owe more money on top of that $1 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you think of healthcare as a business, and going back to the car example, why would I want to take your old ratty car that you didn't take care of into my shop?
Yeah. So let me ask you something. During this period of time that we've been living through, like, have you been doing your job in the same way, or did the way you do your job change as well? Because I imagine that there was a lot of deaths need investigating during this period of time, but also that they've been very secretive about some things, not wanting a lot of unnecessary people around hospital environments. Did your job change during this time, or the way you do it, or are you investigating these kinds of deaths or not?
Yeah, I mean, we have had a lot of mortalities. I mean, people are dying, and I have seen an increase in that. As far as doing my job differently, I guess not really. Not too many things have changed, other than, there are no visitors in the hospital. I mean, they're slowly letting them back in, and so that was kind of different. But I work a lot in isolation. We don't meet anymore in groups in the hospital. We do our meetings all via WebEx. But one thing I will say, one thing that has changed, we are growing weary in healthcare. I mean, we are getting tired.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long. I mean, we can go on like this. I mean, there are people who haven't had a day off since March.
Yeah.
And I don't know in any other industry, who would be expected to work like that and remain compassionate.
Yeah.
And I see probably healthcare provider burnout to be a big deal moving forward. And when you're burned out as a healthcare provider, I always wonder, why is that a problem? Why can we not have more nurses? Well, the thing is, the way nursing school works is you have to do clinical, and you can only have one nursing instructor for, let's say, like 10 nursing students. As a nurse, not many people want to be a nursing instructor because the pay is so low. It's like, why would you leave a high-paying hospital job?
Right, with a lot more time off.
Yeah, I mean, to go and be a nursing instructor and have probably like a 80% reduction in your salary.
Yeah.
It's what people do when you're like about to retire and you just had it with the stress of the hospital. So it's not that easy to get people through the training. But I mean, the demand is going to be huge with all of the baby boomers. But if if we're going to have more end-of-life conversations and we're not going to pull out all the stops like we used to, and people are going to have to learn how to heal themselves.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very good point, and I think that it's difficult when you have both a war on alternative health, but also this rising need for it. But thank you for giving us some insight into a perspective none of us have, but also to remind us that we've been very critical of healthcare workers during this period of time for some really good reasons, but also these are human beings and they're overworked and overtired, and we do need to extend them a degree of compassion and understanding for what they're going through as well. So thank you for reminding us.
I think all of them care. Most of them care, but those people never get interviewed, and you're not going to see them in the media. But your average person that's working in a hospital, they really do care. So
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
yeah, you're
It was
welcome.
nice to see you.
I kind of like the Woodrow thing.
Like kindergarten?
Where's Dave? Oh, there's Dave. Come on up, Dave. Dave Olmsted. Here we go. Let's give a round of applause for Big Dave here.
Hi, Dave.
G'day.
How are you?
Man,
Nice to see you. Welcome to Matrix Mash.
Thank you.
What's going on?
Yeah, riding and guiding, smiling in style.
Absolutely. How you guys like his suspenders, right?
Yeah.
He's always got cool suspenders on, nifty shirts. All right, so tell us a little bit about what you do. You're in transportation, yeah?
I am. I'm a risk management specialist and work for a carrier that manages about 300 trucks. And then I've been in the industry for 40 years now this year. I have 20 inside of management with different companies, different carriers, and then I have 2 million miles over the road, accident free, in which not a lot of people can say.
Wow, so you're a good driver.
Well, there's a big argument about that right now, maybe between me and Mary.
I'm one of the few people in the world that will admit that I'm not a good driver.
We need to be friends.
Yeah. So, okay, so your industry is also like just like Steve. Well, I mean, both Jennifer's as well evolved more over the period of time you've been in it than obviously all of the time that existed before that. So, can you tell us sort of like what is the status right now? Obviously, we sit on the brink of this sort of driverless car revolution. It's already starting to happen a little bit, but it's still not super common. I've only looked over to the side and once or twice seen nobody in the driver's seat. It's not a common sight, but I think that's
It's a little
coming.
terrifying.
Yeah. I've seen dogs in the driver's seat. That gives me more comfort than humans, but only a few times have
As
I
long as they're
seen.
not on the phone. Hello.
I don't know if the dogs were actually in the driver's seat or if I was just seeing that, right? But anywho, so can you tell us what is the reality of that for the people in the industry?
The reality is true. Elon Musk, International, Mercedes, Freightliner, all the big manufacturers have an existing operation. Now, the problem is how do you acclimate that into society? Because if they're driverless, the concept is that they will draft each other. So if you take 8 tractor trailers and they run 30 feet behind each other at 30 to 45 miles an hour on the interstate, and then you have a big interchange with merging traffic, how are you going to manage that? Now, the system has all the navigation and it will sense the car merging on and open and close that. But the general public is expected isn't really going to deal well with that. And then they say, well, have the trucks move to the far left lane. But then how would they merge on and off the road if their top speed is 55 miles an hour downhill with the wind behind them? So there's a lot of navigation. There's still some glitches in the system between automatic braking, also with acceleration. The current concept is that they are going to have a qualified driver on board and setting off seat, and then the system will notify them if there's an error code, and then that driver will take over. Expect that happen for a duration of time, but we're going to have to rebuild our interstate system at one measure or another. So
would just removing the private cars be the solution?
Now that is a conversation. But what do you do with the guy that's got a 71 Monte Carlo in the garage?
You take him to Jennifer's hospital.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, because this isn't something, I can't say that I watched a ton of videos about this topic. I hear it talked about along with the rest of the AI takeover kind of conversation. But I did remember seeing a video maybe 8 years ago that was talking about the highways actually becoming a part of the Internet of Things. That there would literally be, how we have the lanes with the little lights, the reflector lights, that in those will start to become, internet,
a connection sort of thing in order to give information. For say that if there's a traffic backup, it would then notify the vehicle for maybe a secondary route.
Yeah. Also, I think also just being a way of the, constant, aside from just the regular GPS and all that kind of
the
stuff,
onboard.
constant situational awareness of where the cars are, where they're going, what's around it, not only for the driver and the owner of the car companies, but whoever is monitoring things from like an agency bureau kind of scenario. So that basically like the highways will be like a complete and total Wi-Fi Internet of Things zone as well.
And they're testing so many different concepts like this. The biggest deterrent to this is inclement weather.
Okay.
So in that concept, if you have an ice storm, will that concept still function?
Right. Okay.
Odds are it won't.
Right. That's interesting. You know, we hear, I think probably the person who's brought the most amount of attention to like the situation as far as like how it is for the people who work in that industry, like the drivers, like the truck drivers, like they're obviously going through sort of a crisis of what their identity is and what they're going to be doing. The person who's brought the most attention to that is Andrew Yang, right? With the whole UBI thing based on his, you know, conversations over the course of a year with truck drivers. What are you hearing from the people who work, since you've driven 20 million miles, what are your friends saying? Do they absolutely hate this? Are there parts of this they think are good? What is the buzz on the ground amongst the guys who are the workers?
Well, with my fleet, I work for a carrier that is fixing to be nominated for the 4th year in a row as one of the leading carriers to work for drivers.
Okay.
And I'm one of the people that interface with the drivers when they come on board and then when they're out in the field. And then I get all these questions, much about during the civil unrest, Washington, Portland, and so on, that we've all been witnessing of. They want to know the who, the what, the where, the why, and how to do it. And we navigated that conversation on a per need basis. I hear back how some guys are 10 foot tall and bulletproof, you know, come equipped with their own cape. Has a big S on the back, and they don't care.
Yeah.
They're going to go, and no matter what. But I have other people with their wives with them in the truck.
Yep.
That makes them very nervous. With my company, we're supportive of that, and we navigate that. Communication is the backbone to success. So in that, the drivers, some are nervous, some are just 10 foot tall and bulletproof. With my company, I have one of the finest fleets in America.
Yeah.
We get the job done. If there's a driver that says, I don't feel comfortable doing with this, then we make the change. We make the change right then.
Okay. So the biggest conversation amongst your guys has been more the civil unrest rather than the coming sort of AI takeover of their job.
Yeah, because the AI coming over, it won't happen. Odds are, average age of a truck driver these days is about 53.
Okay.
Odds are that's not going to happen in our
career.
lifetimes.
Gotcha.
And it's going to take, I would estimate, 30 to 40 years to integrate the highway systems.
Okay.
Once the system has proven to be safe for public use.
Okay, so for most of us, it's not going to be a significant thing that we're seeing a lot of during this period of time. It's crazy enough as it is.
Yeah,
Right.
We're not going to see anything, probably barely much of anything. I would estimate in 10 years, we'll start seeing them, and then it'll still be a test study thing like the co-driver, takeover driver concept will probably be one of the first things. A lot of conversations say they'll set up hubs on all 4 sides of a large city. Chicago, St. Louis, LA, and LA already has them. And to where these over-the-road truck drivers that are drafting each other, so there's 8 of them, and they'll come into these hubs, and then the city drivers will come out and grab that trailer and go into the city, and do all that more dangerous, more higher risk value, and then drop a loaded trailer, they'll recouple, and then they'll go back to Albuquerque.
So, is there
I
anything?
have a quick question.
Yeah.
So Dave, Waymo had a couple of fatalities in Arizona. How were they resolved legally? Do you have any insight into that? Like, obviously there's no driver, so you can't sue a driver. You've got a car company, and you've got a program. From a legal standpoint, do you have any insight into how that was resolved?
I don't have any actual hands-on knowledge for stuff like that, but each one will be unique because that programming has a track record that would then be admitted into that court of law in order to be analyzed to see if the programming was functioning as designed, or because you still have drivers out there that don't like trucks.
Right.
And they do things to trucks because the truck was too slow. It didn't get out of the way in time. And so now, I think a more important thing to add to that, my fleet has drive cam. Inside there is a lens that looks out front of the truck. for all the action that goes on in the truck, but also has a lens when the brakes are released, looking at the driver and what he's doing so that he's engaged. We teach and preach the Smith system, 5 keys. Again, he's engaged as a driver should be. All drivers should be. And then when this happens, that you get a death accident, you have all this data that'll become part of that in order to distinguish just who's at fault.
Here's another piece, because I think Jennifer was touching on this a little bit. What about like biometric feedback? Like the blood pressure of the driver, heart rate? Are you how far down the line are you guys on that stuff where you're clocking your drivers in real time to see how they're doing?
We don't have that technology. It's not being integrated. The conversation is on board.
Yeah.
But as far as an application, it's not here yet. But it very well could show up. We expect the same kind of visibility as professional pilots.
Okay, now the last question I wanted to ask you was, is there anything really cool going on in your industry, sort of that like flying cars or anything super out there? Like we were promised flying cars or like self-powered drive pods that you can get across the country in a half an hour. Is there anything like this coming on board, or is it just all the annoying AI takeover shit?
Well, if you go to the YouTube and you search for autonomous vehicles, commercial vehicles, those for me are very exciting.
Okay.
Because they're phenomenal. Can you close your eyes and go sit in your car and go, take me home, and never open your eyes again?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. But
Depends where you've been that day.
I'll say almost anything on camera, but I'm not going to say that.
So that's what we're trying to get to, so that the human element is removed from transportation. Because humans, I know it's a shocker, but they make mistakes.
Mhm.
Some are on purpose, road rage and those kind of instances, but the other ones are just innocent because we drive like this while we're petting our dog and eating a hot dog. That's what they're trying to do, is remove the element. Once we get computers in cars, they expect for the crash ratio to be eliminated, virtually eliminated.
What about the ability for, and we're already seeing this, I mean, there's obviously was like a lot of controversy around the death of the journalist Michael Hastings and the idea that his car, the electronic components may have been hacked and taken over. Like, what is the reality of that?
That was some time ago. There's always that possibility in that, especially for some of the tech people that I've talked to. It's a constant struggle to stay ahead of the hackers because they know as much as the supreme programmers do. The realization of that, I think, is rather slim.
Okay.
But for the equipment that we run, my drivers ask me, can the drive cam be hacked and somebody could be watching me? I go, who are you, Princess Diana?
No, but I would say that truck driving maybe has a higher percentage of people that are interested in alternative media and kind of, I mean, I can't tell you how many of my patrons are long distance truck drivers and they tell me that, I keep them company on the road. And so they are probably, I'd say that the truck drivers are conspiracy theorists. So probably.
Remember that truck drivers are left alone for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And like you being a great source for them to feel the outside more, because if you leave us alone, we'll manufacture our own thoughts and then we say that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So a little bit of interaction and drivers will hyperventilate over and find a topic. No different what we're seeing in a social unrest. And sometimes they just need to come back to the here and the now and check themselves. But it's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. Some people are better at bouncing back. Other people fall right into that hole.
Yeah.
But they, at least as long as they have somebody like you that they can touch base with, and I use that loosely.
that'll bring great comfort to my family that people rely on me to touch them down to reality.
Sure. Here's the positive chord. Here's the negative chord.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Wonderful chatting with you. Catch you later.
Let's keep this party rolling here. Natasha, come on up.
Natasha, yay! Hi, Natasha.
Hello.
Welcome to Matrix Manor. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
We always like when Natasha joins us at Conspiracy Cocktail and in the Patreon group chat. So now you're making your first real on-air debut here. So
Yeah.
Alrighty.
All right.
So you have an interesting past in that you used to work in pharma, and then you moved into like agriculture,
Farming.
So can you kind of tell us a little bit about your past in pharma and that transition, and then what you're doing now?
Well, I witnessed a lot of corruption,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to be a part of it. So I wanted to go do something more meaningful. So I took a 95% pay cut.
That's falling on your sword, kid.
And got out of that. And that was about 15 years ago. And so I've been working in farming ever since.
So in 15 years, you've made as much money as you made in 1 year. 1 year
Just
in
about,
pharma.
yeah. But I've eaten better. I've been healthier. I've been
Yeah.
emotionally healthier.
So what kind of farming do you do?
Well, the farm I work for is a high altitude organic farm. And we grow, because it's high altitude, we can grow really good sweet greens all the way through the winter, or through this hot heat of the summer when we're up in the mountains above Salt Lake City. So in Summit County, it's near Park City, Utah.
And what greens would be considered sweet greens?
Well, lettuces, arugula, kale, things like that,
Okay.
that during the scorching heat of the summer, you can't grow
Okay.
in a hotter, down, like for example, in Salt Lake City, that gives us like a marketing advantage. We can be selling greens in the same market area when they don't have them in Salt Lake City.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's farm you're working at now. That's mostly what you guys specialize in there is the sweet greens.
We have everything. We have roots and garlic and greenhouses where we do fruit crops as well,
And
tomatoes and cucumbers. And
What do you
herbs.
guys do when it gets really cold in the winter there? Like I live in California and my mom actually lives in Ventura, which is where probably the most vegetables and fruits in the entire country comes from.
Right, exactly.
And so it's obviously low elevation and standards between 60 and 80 degrees year round there.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of variance, but you guys get hot in the summer and really freezing cold in the winter. So how do you guys manage that? Is that you guys cover your stuff or?
Yeah. So it's just a lot more labor intensive. We have our farm, part of the farm is at 5,800 feet and the other part is at 7,200 feet elevation. And we have, the one at 5,800 feet actually gets colder because we've got like a little stream that comes down from the Uinta Mountains, creates this kind of cold pocket basin where the cold air sinks in. So we have 56 frost-free days a year there. And it just takes a lot more management. When it might freeze, we have to cover things up. And, we are already into that, of course, this year. So.
Is it what kind of farm? Is it like a regenerative farm or is it a?
Well,
I've been learning a lot about
regenerative. So that's
farming.
actually what I wanted to talk more about. So our farm does not do that, but this is where the future of food growing is in regenerative farming. So organic, and our farm uses some biodynamic principles, which kind of goes in that direction. It's actually it's kind of applying astrology to farming.
It's kind of some Rudolf Steiner kind of stuff.
It's Steiner.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like farming using astrology and homeopathy together.
Love it.
It's very cool. But organic per se, like when you go to Whole Foods and buy your organic kale or whatever, that only addresses chemical-free growing. It doesn't address the fact that we have a soil crisis going on. We have killed the soil on the planet, and it's not just agricultural practices, it's industrial practices. So because we take things out of the center of the earth, we combust them and put them back on the top of the earth through, acid rain and chemtrails, who knows what's coming down on the soil too. I mean, some of those things we do know, I think, but we have killed the soil, and soil is like the microbiome of soil is analogous to the microbiome of our gut. And so the health of the soil is directly related to human health and the health of everything else on the planet. So when the soil is dead and unhealthy, so are our guts.
Mhm.
So if we're going to grow food that's going to nourish people again, we have to get the soil healthy again. And just organic farming isn't going to do that. So we have to regenerate the soil. And this means bringing in the practices that will bring it back to what it was like before we were here. And whether or not we can do that is the question. Animals are a big part of this.
Yeah.
This is where, and I'm not going to bash on vegans, but
Mhm.
this is where vegans are missing part of the picture.
Yeah.
Because without animals, you're limited to petroleum-based fertilizers,
Yeah.
or you're limited to plant-based composts, where if you're starting growing these plants with soil that doesn't have any nutrients in it, the plants aren't going to take up the nutrients. You're gonna be in this cycle of just adding back plant matter that is nutrient deficient.
Have you seen, there was a documentary that came out, maybe it was a year ago, maybe a couple years ago, like
The biggest little
So
farm.
that's actually a farm right out near where
Yes,
I grew up.
It is very close
And
to
they
you.
went through that whole exercise
Yes.
of understanding that, like, not only did animals have to be part of the picture, but also sometimes killing animals had to be part of the picture for a properly functioning
Exactly.
regenerative farm. And
Yeah.
they went through, it's a great documentary. I recommend people.
It's wonderful.
watch
It's
it,
wonderful.
yeah.
I highly recommend The Biggest Little Farm. It debuted at Sundance in Utah, so a lot of us got to see it,
Yeah.
like with the creators there and everything
Yeah.
like that. So it's a great example of regenerative farming. And I'm just curious, like, who has heard that term that's in our audience, regenerative farming? Yeah, okay, so not that many people. Sometimes you'll hear it called beyond organic.
Mhm.
But if the farmer doesn't have a way to make it work with animals, then they can't afford to do it. And by selling the animal products is the way they can afford to do it.
Yeah. Well,
So-
actually, like when I had my little like strict carnivore experience earlier this year, I spent that time not just doing it, but also educating myself on the the different kinds and the different characters involved in that movement.
Mhm.
And Sean Baker, who's one of the main forward faces of it,
Mhm.
he does a lot to work with regenerative farmers and to support them in what they're doing. And what
Uh-huh.
he talks about it a lot. So I actually learned quite a bit from him, which surprised me. And one of the things that I didn't know, this hadn't been one of my critiques of vegans, right? Who I respect their morality piece
Right.
of it. But one of the things he talked about is the amount of small animals that are killed during the process of trying to farm the vegan way
Yes.
is actually killing more little spirits and souls than killing a few big animals to healthfully maintain a farm.
Well, and the animals and, just countless birds and rodents and
Mhm.
insects and everything that we displace.
Yes.
So in the farming locale, as well as all of the downstream animals that we poison through, and
Yeah.
it's not even chemical use. Sometimes it's just soil runoff.
Yeah.
And the vegans don't realize that something dies for you to eat, whether
Mhm.
it's a vegetable or a plant. And
Yeah.
food choices are food choices, but they still should go into it informed and realizing that, things are going to die. That's just how this 3D world works.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned also that was interesting is that there has never been a vegan civilization really in history. It's a modern invention.
Yeah.
There's been vegetarian
Mhm.
societies and there's been carnivore societies and omnivore societies, but those, like the places that have been vegetarian, part of the reason, like the Hunza, that it's been successful is because they live in an area that almost naturally has that regenerative process due
Yes.
to like the kind of water that comes down the mountain in the particular lake that has a certain mineral in it. The goat does this and the whatever. So
Yeah.
it has that natural thing that isn't available everywhere. And that, that's really like the vegan thing is putting a strain on the earth that people wouldn't realize that a vegetarian diet might not necessarily because of the way the animals play into that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It was really cool to learn about that. Yeah.
And also, when you look at tribes that actually eat only animals and animal products, and there's several examples of this
Mhm.
around the world, they have the lowest incidence of disease of any people.
And I have the best
So-
teeth too, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. No, it's interesting. Like the Weston Price information really explains a lot of that really well.
I'm glad I work in a bag of vegans.
We're not bagging. We're just,
So this is good information. I have just a quick question, Tasha. Did you see Interstellar?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole soil thing is like sort of the foundation of that film. They don't go into the whole global warming, right? They go into a soil crisis in Interstellar. And that's the sort of point of departure for the film. Did you relate to that at all when you saw that movie?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's like our Kansas Dust Bowl, right? But soil is in crisis everywhere. We've lost like 80%. I don't know. Do you Crimmies know the figure for 80% of the topsoil? Yeah.
And when I took the permaculture classes 20 years ago, they were saying there's only 1 inch of topsoil left.
Yeah.
And what astonished me is that when Europeans first came to this continent, it was like 15 feet of topsoil.
Yeah. And it ties into water management. It ties into, I mean, again, I can't overemphasize that the microbiome is so important in what that soil is holding. So in our own guts, we know now that we can't, we don't digest our own food. It's all the critters that live inside of us that digest the food.
Yeah.
The same with the plants. The plant roots have this relationship with the fungi and the bacteria that grow in the soil. They cannot absorb nutrients without these things. When you put a chemical in the soil, it kills
all that
all of these
microbial
things,
stuff.
and then the plant picks up no nutrition.
So can I ask you a real weird question?
Sure.
So we had a request for this question.
Okay.
So and since we're talking about microbiome, it actually makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Do you know anything about the idea of a person is growing their own food, the benefits of possibly including their own waste in it, as that the soil sort of then, or the food almost programmed for the health of that person? Is that something that's talked about amongst your people at all? Do you know anything about that?
It's not, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I mean, you can decompose human waste and turn it into nutrition to put back on, and that's one of the progressive things that you can do for waste management as well. So
Progressive in the best sense of the word.
Yes. Solves 2 birds with 1 stone, and it's
and also takes care of the problem we talked about at Conspiracy Cocktail a few weeks ago about what they could be doing with sewage management, right? That's a big surveillance system, actually.
Right. Yeah.
That's a question you should ask John McAfee, I think. You get right to the root of that.
So, okay. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yes.
And I always love seeing you.
Natasha, that's great. Thank you. So we have a lot of very intelligent, informed people here, right? This is a very small cross section of our little world, and this is how the world works. There are people with lots of information, lots of experience, lots of working knowledge that you can tap into all the time, right? And we get it beamed at us in ways that are, almost like being force-fed their version of expertise.
Yeah, every expert they feed to us, almost everyone without fail has been wrong recently. I think over and over.
Too, right?
Huh?
That's the other thing, they've been wrong.
They're wrong, right? And so, they want us to trust people we don't know. And I think this is evidence that there's people that we all know, whether it be in our actual immediate life or people we've developed relationships with over the years in chat rooms and in groups and stuff like that we can go to have our questions answered. We don't have to defer to the experts or even the sub-experts that are presented to us all the time.
Yeah. So we've looked at a lot of kind of industrial stuff, sort of, we've had healthcare and planning, architecture, urban planning, office space, transportation,
Time to go a little woo.
agriculture,
Yeah.
right? So let's move into the arts, and let's bring up Steve Crimmy, and Steve can talk about the future of publishing.
Well, I'd like to at least buck the trend of informed, intelligent guests.
Hi,
Emily.
You can be intelligent, Steve.
You guys all know
Emily.
Steve. We do lots of shows together.
We've
So
done
this
shows
isn't
together, but never in the same camera.
never in person, right? Yeah. So he's
So-
across the country. So Steve is a writer and a publisher in addition to being a world-renowned sacred geometer. So we're gonna hear about this aspect, Steve. And he has a table full of interesting books that he's published, and some of which he wrote himself over on the table here. But what can you tell us? I mean, just like these industries, yours also is going through, has been going through, because of things like Amazon and whatnot, and self-publishing and things like that. A huge revolution for a long time, but like right now, like what's happening? Like you don't hear about the crisis of the publishing industry during COVID. So tell us what it is.
Well, right now it's up. It's up in there, and like you said, I mean, publishing went through a complete revolution. Well, say about early 2000s. And that happened with the coming on of on-demand printing. And what that made possible is independent and small publishers. Because if you look at like the New York Times book review, which it probably still comes out, you'd find like 6 publishing companies in it, you know, doing the whole thing, you know, Simon and Schuster, et cetera. There's only like a handful of them who were controlling the whole thing. So, and one of the reasons being is that you would have to print at least 1,000 books that you were publishing, and the printing is one thing, and then you have to store. So if you have 50, 60 books that you're publishing, you have a place to store them, and you have to print at least 1,000 to make it worth your while. And of course, all the printing was being done in China. So, for example, this book, which is the latest book that we published, came out September 1st, which is the first of a fantasy novel trilogy, is cost me $7 to print, all right, and then add another $1 just to have it shipped. The shipping is the other thing. So printing has gone way up, and shipping has gone way up. And then so then from my end of it, when I'm publishing an author, they're like, well, I can't charge $24 for the book, you know, and you know, and at $24 at wholesale. So if Amazon sells it, they're selling it wholesale. So I'm getting, so if it's 24.12, so you know, I'm getting like $4 back. So at best of all worlds, the author and I split $2 on a book that's sold on Amazon, and more often it's like $1.50, $1.25. So it's really hard to make money unless. So
do people buy directly from your website, or do you only sell
less?
through
So
Amazon?
I sell more because as Robert always says, yes, the devil is convenience.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more devilish than Amazon and convenience, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you buy it from my publishing, from my site, you know, you pay $24, and then I split that. I have a very generous with our authors, where we split all the profits 50-50. So on one hand, you've had so what happens in the on-demand printing, which is obviously much more expensive than having 1,000 printed. On-demand means you print as many as you want. If I want one book, they send it to me. If I want 100 books sent to me, they'll send me 100 books. You know, but the discount even at that is only slight. So that's kind of, you know, so, but what it does is it makes it possible for me to publish and not to sit in my little corner of my house at my office, and I can, you know, just work on the computer, publish, and then I don't have to store, you know, all those books.
And then what about, I mean, that's sort of like the publishing end of it, but like, what about as far as for people who write books and write really particular kinds of books, because people's attention spans have been shorter. People are consuming a different kind of material now than they did even 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. Is book writing, in the way that it's been known and been an art form for hundreds of years, going away? It's not going away.
No,
okay,
I think it's coming back, actually.
Okay.
So, but we've gone through several revolutions, being, you know, so the first one, you know, the publishing, and then also then the inception of the Kindle and the Nook and all that. I think, and there were wars with these various things, but I think the Kindle is the one that's left standing right now. And again, the convenience of having, you know, as many books as you could possibly want, Library of Alexandria, except for what's in the Vatican Library, on your own little thing, which is nice, and they've improved them. So, you know, it's so nicely backlit and all that. But so that's okay. so for people like that, and I think some people got tired of it and like to have actual physical books. And then audio books became very large, and it's still very big. It's probably bigger than actual physical books at the moment.
Yeah.
People like, the stories having, whatever, Tom Cruise read.
I was gonna say, we would have
bedtime
celebrities,
stories,
yeah.
and that's a whole issue. But there's some people who are very good at it, and the nice thing about that, it's kind of going back to the old, storytelling around the campfire kind of thing, where all this began, right? Telling stories, and some of these people are very good, different voices and things like that. But all of that side of it, all the whole electronic side of it, is erasable and censorable, as your friend Michael Jones found out when Amazon decided to take down his books. Now, part of that was because he made a specific exclusivity deal with Amazon, and that enabled them to do that. So that's the downside of it. It's like when the Taliban left Afghanistan, what's the first thing that happened? They buried all their cassette players underground, and because they weren't allowed to play music, and they popped them up. So it's harder to erase these than it is to erase things electronically. So that's why I think books themselves, physical books, are becoming more and more important. The return to them, and to have actual physical books with what's in them, and the information in them, whether it's information or stories or whatever.
I think I think I was on to the scam of the Kindle thing really early on, because they named it Kindle. They're telling you they're going to burn this shit. It's going to be a different kind of burning. But I read a story that was like the weirdest thing. It talked about how Kindle's closest competitor was Nook, and they didn't want to do anything to promote it. So in the Kindle system, anytime the word Nook appeared, it was replaced with the word Kindle in every book that would go through that system, right? So if at this point they were doing it with something like that, but it's a completely different word. It could change the meaning of a sentence. It could change the meaning of a paragraph, and the entire meaning of a story. But that's going to be happening with words more significant than Kindle or Nook, right? And so they can literally burn the books, but they would still look like they're there in your collection, right? So it's particularly insidious. I love bookstores, right? Like, I've always loved, even when I've been through phases in my life where I'm not reading a lot of books, I love to go, I love to look, I love to sit, I like to buy. Fortunately, in Los Angeles, there's still a lot of funky old bookstores. But do you think bookstores are going to come back, or do you think that's like? Well,
that's a long-term question. That depends on a lot of other things coming back. But like I grew up in New York City, where was it Forbidden Planet, all science fiction books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So cool. Yeah.
St. Mark's bookstore, for all anarchist books and things like that. So it was, to the point where there were just these great specialty bookstores, and they all went out one by one. First with Barnes and Noble, and then also with the other big one.
When I lived downtown, I lived across the street, catty corner from an awesome bookstore called The Last Bookstore, and this was like during a period of time where a lot of crazy stuff was going on as well. Like Occupy Wall Street was happening even in Los Angeles. And, this is when the Alex Jones dystopic view of the future was constantly talked about and whatever. And I thought, if the end of the world comes, in the last 2 minutes before the real craziness happens, I'm going to run across the street, hide in the bookstore, and be happy with all the books for the rest of my life. The Last Bookstore.
And back before Google Maps, you used to give directions.
Yeah.
And you always knew about a person from, the markers they would use, right? So I would always tell people in terms of bookstores where they were going. Other people in terms of bars. It was actually exactly the way of getting to some, understanding somebody.
Yeah. Books I think they're our most important form of sort of entertainment, right? The book is kind of forever if you have it, right? It's just completely different than all the other kinds. It's really, you can escape into it in a way you can't with other media. So I hope it's here to stay.
I think so. Yeah. One of the things that needs improvement. So self-publishing is also huge, which is concomitant with the on-demand printing, because they use that. But right now, self-publishing equals miles of typos, and
it's really, so bad sometimes.
People who write don't think they need an editor.
And you'll see that on even Bloomberg.
Yep.
The theoretical, websites that are supposed to represent journalism. Terrible.
And a lot of that is AI writing too.
Yeah. I have a quick question, Steve.
Yeah.
And I kind of know what your flip answer will be, but I want to know what maybe I know what it is. Does being a writer still and an author still hold a certain cachet? Like, where you write a book and all of a sudden there's kind of a gravitas associated with being an author?
Well, I'll say it was for me.
It was for you.
It was for me.
Now that was not the answer I expected, but that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, it was, because because all right, so you grow up, a literature major as
Right.
you were,
Yeah.
and you're driving around, whatever, being interviewed by Terry Gross in your head or something like that, right? And so, but writing, finishing, and publishing a book is a complete process that is not easy.
No.
And to do it well, and to be pleased with it at the end. And once you're done with it, it's a certain stage of accomplishment.
It is really.
And so I can call myself an author, or if I give a talk somewhere, or whatever. So it means something to me.
And you think it still has that gravitas when somebody publishes now, and it's like, oh, he's an author. Let's check this person out.
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
Because the whole literary apparatus is gone. There's no real discussion, like in literary terms, of books and things like
Right.
that. That much is just, because it's mostly it's a Twitter level kind of discussion of things, or, but even you look at even Amazon reviews, and there's some really good ones, and people really actually put some intelligence into it, and they're actually worth reading if you're trying to decide whether or not to buy a book.
My favorite is when Robert David Steele talks about how he's done more Amazon reviews of books than any other person in the whole world.
Yes. And I believe him there about as much as I believe everything else.
Right. Like he has his own personal rating on Amazon book reviews or something like that. That shit makes me, it's funny.
So, and for us, beauty, the actual motto, our publishing company is called Logos Sophia. So it's a combination of the Logos and Sophia, the male side and the female side of the divinity. And our motto is beauty is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And so that's why I brought this one up. This is our latest book, and I think it's one of our most beautiful covers. And you can see there's a sort of Gemini element to it.
It does.
There's a serious Gemini element to it. It's the first of 3 of a fantasy series.
Laura bought it. It looked beautiful to her too.
Yeah, and it's and I can give an opportunity for Mindy Meltz, who wrote this, to have her book launch. She's an amazing writer. And she's like too good for most places, to publish. So, so that's kind of what it is. When I was 60, Chris got me a couple of years ago. So Chris got me a reading with Robert, and I was like, 11 hours a day for, a decade, working on building the publishing company, and it wasn't making any money. And so I'm going to my reading with Robert thinking, all right, well, I'm done. I gave it my best shot. I can just, move on. And Robert's reading was all about, no, you got to stay the course. And I'm like, fuck you. I don't want that. It was like the worst reading ever, So, but thank you for it. And I kept going, and we've got more good, beautiful books. And that's, and that's it. And that's
Got your website?
And the website, logosophiabooks.com.
And you guys can catch Steve every month with Robert, and very often with me in the Sacred Geometry series. And so there's always the opportunity to connect with them that way as well.
Yeah. So thank you. And thanks for being here. Thanks for everything. Enjoying it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're really running up on our dinner time, but I do want to bring some more people up here. And it's not like we're going to have speed date, but we are going to kind of move it along.
All right.
Okay. So Hope, why don't you come on up here, because you're going to be arts related, and I think have a lot to share about this crisis in the arts that we're facing with live performance. Here she is.
Hi.
Hope Easton.
Hi. I just met Hope yesterday, but we've been hanging out and getting to know each other since we're both people who,
the LA connection is here.
yes, who are disappointed in what's going on in the arts in LA right now. So
Yeah, there's nothing going on. No.
Nothing going on.
Pretty much. But yeah, I'm trying to disconnect from nothing going on and bringing any kind of job to my reality so I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
So I have had some gigs, but like in the beginning of the COVID, it took me March, April, May until I had like my first job up in Santa Barbara, and then nothing June, July, and then August was great. And I was really trying to like, I just don't want to connect to like music is not happening.
Yeah.
But these are gigs. These aren't like venues.
Jobs.
They're not,
Yeah.
It's some recording, which is great. You can do it at home. And unfortunately, Zoom is a huge thing, which for me, I have one student and it is like a small torture to teach on Zoom because first of all, the sound, when I first started doing it, I was like,
Tell people what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a cellist.
Yeah.
And a singer-songwriter, and I have my own chamber music group, which is mostly classical, but I do some jazz because I can play bass lines. So, so I've gotten gigs like, a few weddings, a funeral, things like that. One concert.
4 weddings and a funeral.
4 weddings and a funeral. And I did do one like little quartet concert in someone's house in Laguna because they were all missing. There's a big concert series in Laguna, and they were like purchasing music for the whole like canyon there. So I have my own music, my sound set up. So I'm like, okay, I'll bring sound. And people were like down the canyon clapping for us, like after tunes. And it was great. And 2 of us were wearing masks and 2 of us weren't. It was, even though it was my quartet. So
yeah. Yeah. So just out of curiosity, like one of the things that I've noticed, I'm involved in a musical scene as well, but a very different one than yours, but a lot of it seems to be the same reaction. Why do you think it is that so many of these artists are not questioning the narrative more when it is costing them their livelihood and their passion?
Great question.
I think Kool-Aid and being hypnotized into believing everything that you see on the screen, the boob tube, as we call it, And I had a conversation. Some of my friends are working like here and there, and they'll come over my house and we'll jam here and there because it's like, what the hell are we doing if we're not playing? I had some friends that in the beginning weren't playing at all. Like one of my girlfriend's a violin player. I'm like, are you playing? She's like, no. I'm like, what? Of course, I got her some jobs, and now she's getting little jobs, and we're both like, we gotta, say we're getting jobs instead of saying there's no work, because that's also like a trip up.
Mind control program.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I had a very interesting email from an LA opera guy who I play Saturday mornings with at the Temple, because we have like 5 great singers with the cantor, and I always play cello. And we had done one thing for the Temple that was like a video of this one tune. We all recorded and blah, blah, blah. And on the video, we're all seeing each other. We hadn't seen each other and, this and that. And I just happened to spurt out, well, we're not essential. Like I was like giving a little bit of like the FU to the powers that be. And the cantor's like, but you're so essential. Like you're more essential than that. And so it took him like 2 months to send me this email like a few days ago, saying he was surprised I said that, and then going on about what you just said, like why no one's standing up for musicians. LA Phil's closed, the LA Opera is done, LA Chorale. So he said, I've lost thousands of dollars. And I told him, I wrote him back. Oh, and then he also did like qualify it to like the Nazi Germany, where like in Nazi Germany, the Jews were not getting hired and the Germans were, and they just didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And they kept it like you just lost your job.
First they came for the musicians.
Right. So here's a question that takes that one step deeper, though. Like one of the things that I'm really concerned about in artistic communities is the fact that they've become a monoculture that maybe has diversity of like gender and skin color, but no diversity of thought or opinion. And that was why this was so easy for this to happen, is because even though I've been around in the dance music scene in Los Angeles for 20 years, like I can count, maybe I know 1 or 2 other people that are even anywhere close to in line with the way that I see the world, and everybody else is just completely the opposite, right? So how can creativity flourish when everybody had the same opinion about things? It seems to me almost as sad as what's happening to the community based on perceived virus, right? That everybody thinks the same thing.
I think you have to light a little match of your own hope.
Yeah.
I hate to use my own name, but because Robert asked me to come here, and he's like, well, I don't think it's in June or something. And he's like, well, you might want to have a product, and I've been working on songs with this producer since 2017. And and I was like in like May or June, I don't know when you asked me, I was like, oh my God, I better get my freaking butt working. And it took me, I think, with my producer, because I was like fine doing my own recording of my cello and whatever I can do. But for me to record my own vocals, it's like not the best because it's just engineering and then whatever. So I'm like, I finally called Dan, my guy. I think we saw each other in June for the first time. And he let me over because I know he was kind of like, you know, you don't have COVID. And I'm like, you know, because we had met right when COVID started. I did one song with him, I think in February. And he was like, well, it only affects old people. And so, you know, and then I knew like March and April, May, nothing was happening. And then, I don't know, I got lucky because he let me come over. So I've actually finished an album, which was a long time in the making and a long time doing a CD. So, you know, and I've had people over and I'm like, let's just play. And, you know, if I can get a gig for somebody, it's like my happy day.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, just the joy
and
of
a lot of
playing
it's
together,
outside. Like right now, they'll do stuff outside. Like I've been hired by a church doing masses for like either quartet or trio outside.
Yeah.
You won't go in the church. And I actually was at the temple. I play, you know, I do play a lot of religious stuff. And at the temple for the high holidays, which were like what, a week and a half ago, they ended up videotaping at the temple, which is like everyone's wearing a mask. The temple is gigantic. There's like 20 people there. And the cantor's like, put your mask on, you know? And then we go and eat and you're not wearing your mask. And I'm just like, I don't get this. I don't get it, but whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm up in the choir loft with the 74-year-old, not Jewish organ player. And the woman comes up to us, and it's big. It's a big space in the choir loft. And she's like, she's telling the organist, you need to put your mask on. And he's like, well, then I might as well go home because I won't be able to see anything with my glasses on, you know? And he was like giving her a big FY. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm looking at Bill. I'm like, I'm not putting my mask on, you know, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like kind of fighting back of the opposite, you know, and it's hard. Like in LA, I'll like walk my 2-mile walk to get some exercise. And I'm like the only person that doesn't have a mask on outside in like 90-degree heat.
Yeah.
And one time I did it recently and I was like, called my girlfriend. I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, I thought like, I think that I have a problem because I don't have a mask on.
Yeah. No, it's the mind control is thick and deep.
Yeah.
But a little less out where I live than maybe where you live, but I'm looking forward to hearing you play tonight.
Thank you.
So you get to be in front of people, none of whom will be masked. So I hope it's a great experience for you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So what's going on in Chatland? You got any comments there?
I'm not good at monitoring Chatland and still paying attention, but everybody's still here. There's a lot of people here.
Cool.
Let's see. I don't even know what they're talking. The Zoom is not a replacement for life. Absolutely, Christine Mose. Hi, Beth Martins. Beth Martins loves you. Let's see what else is going on. I have a hard time doing this. Hi, Robin Scott. Hi, Robin. People are requesting Jasper. Jasper's not here. I wish Jasper were here also. I wonder if Jasper gets more requests than either of us ever do. I'm sure.
I think I'm just an excuse for Jasper. People come to the show and watch me, but it's really about Jasper.
It's Jasper Cast IRL.
Yeah. So
All right, we got one more, yeah?
We have a little bit of time left, and I want to squeeze 2 more people in. Okay. So Jacqueline, why don't you come on up here? And Jacqueline is an astrologer, and she's got about I think 5 images that she wanted to share to kind of give people a sense as to, you know, kind of where we are. And it's an art. Astrology is an art. And you are not, we had a really interesting discussion that you had stopped doing readings because you were like physically not doing well with headaches. But for me as an astrologer, this time has been pretty good, I have to say, because of the, you know, a lot of people at home and trying to figure out what to do. And I know that you've taken a bit of a break, but have you seen an uptick in astrology in general during this time?
No, actually, well, my group is not meeting at all. I know that a lot of people are using Zoom for their meetings, but I haven't been participating in them either. So I'm not really one to ask right now.
Yeah. So, but I guess from a practitioner perspective, it's one of those things where Zoom and Skype has always been a part of what I did. And it really hasn't changed a whole lot. And in fact, it's become more, I think, accessible in some ways. So, but you are a group-oriented person, and you've got some information that you want to share, and you've been looking at kind of where we are, where we're going. And so why don't you work with Emily over there and take us through that a little bit.
All right. So
Okay.
what you got to show me? You want to start with the pictures?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
All right. I'm working with the different
And
systems.
while she's doing that, Jeff, why don't you tell people a bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, I'm an astrologer. I've been running at a group in South Jersey since 1997. And we've had our transitions. I just recently started having meetings in my home to save us money, and it was a little more comfortable. We were meeting at a church before. And I think a lot of people would like it to start up again, but I haven't really, like I said, got into the Zoom.
Sorry,
meetings.
how did I lose it? Which one is it?
Let's see, we gotta go back to.
Sorry, guys. I'm using Robert's system here, and I'm not used to it. So my apologies to the people at home.
You click on that,
Oh, it's that one.
and is that Twitter?
No, I don't, yeah, that's not it.
That's not it. Where we go?
When I tried to bring back the StreamYard, it's not there.
Okay, I'm gonna have to climb. in
I'm
here.
sorry, guys.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Let me slide out.
We have to wait. What happened?
Let's see. All right.
Technical
Where are we?
difficulties.
All right, so
I just made it smaller with the little shrink button.
you went to the wrong.
Oh,
Get it back to the
wrong
right.
window.
You gotta be. There we
There we
go.
are.
We're all here still. Okay.
Yes, looks
So
like
what we're gonna do here is do a little share screen,
Yeah, I already.
right? And we're gonna do that.
Yes,
We're not gonna use that though. We don't want to use that. So
I did open the right one.
let's see. You want to go. Yeah. We're in. You want number 0 right
Yeah,
there.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's open. Just click back down here, right?
yep.
And then you move this up here.
Okay.
Now we're going to screen share right there, application
There it
window.
is. Okay.
Wow, you have to teach me some of this
You
stuff.
have to highlight it.
Yep. And
There we go. Okay.
take it away, JP. There you go.
Okay,
I'm
is
gonna
that
climb out.
centered? It's not really centered.
It is centered. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the folks at home, she's Jane P. Love in the
In the
chat
chat
room.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
That's my handle. So we all heard about the age of Aquarius. There's a big speculation about exactly when that's going to happen. And nobody really knows, to tell you the truth. But so if you look, we have a cross in the sky. What's rising, what's setting, what's directly above us, and what's directly below us. So we all die on a cross at some point. And that grand cross that we had with the age of Pisces is Pisces was on one side, Virgo was on the other side, Sagittarius was on one side, and Gemini was on the other side in that cross for the age. Now we've just started switching into the age of Aquarius, which would have Aquarius on one side, Leo on the other, Scorpio, and Taurus on the other. Now, when you're trying to look at the ages, you want to try to balance between the two. Like with age of Pisces, you had Pisces and Virgo, which is all about sacrifice, religion, and Virgo is about the earth and our health. But when you switch over to the age of Aquarius and Leo, you're talking about the heart of the individual and the heart of the group. So this is the theme that we're going to be dealing with over the next 2,000 years in this age of Aquarius. So can you go to the next one?
All right. So
So the next one will show the cross of the fixed signs. And in the Bible, I believe it says that the cross of the fixed signs is God, representation of God. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of big changes for us as humans.
okay. How did it not end up there?
And they run into difficulties again.
Yeah, but I did it exactly the way we were supposed to. So I'm here, highlighted it, came
I'll
back.
tell you what, let me step in with Jacqueline on this.
All right, cool.
That way I can facilitate. You can be the voice of God.
I'll be the voice. Finally.
All right.
So like I said, it's going to be about the individual versus the group. And I think we're already seeing that theme playing out, whether we've started the age of Aquarius or not. Robert, when do you think the age of Aquarius is starting?
Well, I thought it started in 1962, actually. but they derailed it
Mm.
and they hijacked it. So we have another shot coming up, and I think February, when we have Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, we have that big stellium coming in Aquarius. But I really think the final kicker is going to be when it arrives in Pluto.
Right, Pluto
Yeah.
steps in just, yes, Aquarius.
Yeah.
So this is just to show you that the cross of the fixed cross that we're going to be dealing with. Can you go to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
This is going to be very quick, I hope. Okay, so this is how I like to teach about the planets. I think it makes it easy for people to understand. When you look at the planets, we have the sun is the ego, right? You guys can't
They
see
can't
this.
see it, but they'll be able to see it later. And
Okay.
and so you just talk to the people right there in the show.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have the sun, that's the ego, and that's to be. We have Mercury, which is our mind. Venus, which is our values and how we relate to people. We have the earth, which is our home. We have the moon, which helps us to feel and reflect. We have Mars, which is our motivations. Jupiter, which is our justice. Saturn, which is our limitations and our structures. We have Pluto, which is how we transform and power. Uranus is how a collective consciousness. And with Neptune, we have our unconscious collective consciousness.
So the graphic is starting with the sun and kind of graduating all the way down to the outer planets. You guys will see this on the replay. Yeah.
Okay, so when you start from the first house in astrology, you start with Aries, right? That is the self. And then when you go to Taurus, it's the individual developing their characteristics, their wants, their desires, their needs to relate. Then when you get to Gemini, it's how you learn and communicate. When you get to Cancer, you develop yourself through your relationship with your family and your mother. And then when you get to Leo, you're developing your ego. When you get to Virgo, you're learning skills that'll help you out in your life. So next. So when you get to the top of the chart, you're stepping into other people, not your personal reality. When you get to the 7th house, you're getting to Libra, which is another way of communicating one-on-one with people. When you get to the 8th house, it's what you share with other people, banks and loans and even sex. When you get to the 9th house, and Jupiter, you're learning about other people's philosophies, other people's beliefs. When you get to the 10th house, you're dealing with the laws of the world, your reputation in the world. And Uranus is about the group. You know, everybody's in it together. And Neptune in the 12th house is about the collective unconscious. So, I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead, go to the next one.
Okay.
So this is the slide that I really wanted you guys to see. I was trying to add this to what Robert was teaching us earlier today about, you know, where we're at right now. And what I did was I put boxes where Pluto was in Capricorn, and it is in Capricorn from 2008 to 2024. And Jupiter was in Capricorn this year also, and Saturn was in Capricorn. So they were all working together to deconstruct our reality and our laws. And yes, well, it's not done yet. So one of the things I thought was really interesting is that when Pluto went into Capricorn, Saturn was in Virgo. When Pluto leaves Capricorn, Saturn will be in Pisces. So that means the whole top part of the chart, which has to do with our collective consciousness, is being taught a lesson. It's kind of like we're dealing with reality or karma on a quicker basis. If you understand the ecliptic path of Pluto, I need some drink, my mouth is dry. It has a very unusual ecliptic path. So sometimes when it's in certain signs, it goes really fast. And that's Libra and Sagittarius and Scorpio. But But when it gets into Capricorn, it's going up the long haul, so it takes a little longer. It could be like, I think, what's it, 30 years? It seemed?
Yeah.
So before, karma was kind of speeded up. And I think that we were really finishing up a cycle as a group of people where like Robert was saying, we're going to start a new, thank you, a new cycle. So also in the mix is Uranus, which is teaching us new social norms. And isn't that the truth? We have to wear masks, we have to stand 6 feet apart. But when Uranus is in Taurus, it works. Now Venus is going to be retrograde the whole time the Uranus is in Taurus. Venus is going to be retrograde in Scorpio, Gemini, Capricorn, Leo, and Aries. So these are all teaching us new value systems and new ways of relating, and also, you know, what's really important. I guess that's the same as value systems.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I forgot what else I was going to say.
We have Mars. Today I talked about how Mars is going to be going through basically from at the end of the year, Taurus through Libra, where it begins its journey through the outer signs.
Mm-hmm.
So all this year, Mars will be going through the personal signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about that today. And maybe that can fit into some of the sort of the information you're sharing with about the inner planets and Venus. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that was great. I didn't notice that with my eyes. I didn't see that Mars was finishing up that cycle and was on its own. I think that I've actually been really scared, to tell you the truth, because of all the energy and seeing how people are just falling into place. It really scares me. It makes me think that when we get into Pluto in Aquarius, it's very possible that technology could really rule over us in a very big way. But you know, you telling us that you think something good's going to be happening around 2030.
2030, I think, is a chance for something very new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very new. Yeah.
And when Uranus leaves Taurus and goes into Gemini, you know, it'll be a nice trine. Maybe we will have driving less cars at that point, because we'll have technology through Gemini things, which is what? Cars and communication, and maybe even books like we were talking about a little while ago. Yeah. So that's my take.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we don't have that much time left, but I do want to bring Mike up. So Mike, come on up here.
I'm an expert at nothing, mind you.
Well, I've got Mike here. I've got Mike here really for his grandson. But Mike is a Gemini, and he's also a mail carrier, which is a very Gemini kind of thing, right? Messenger of the everyday gods. So when did you start being a mail carrier?
15 years ago.
Okay.
It's been 15 years.
All right. And just boots on the ground. I mean, how's that world changed?
It's changes all the time. Currently, you could say the volume has gone up about 3 times, and the media will tell you another story.
You say volume, mail volume?
Mail volume, and
how much is junk mail in direct marketing?
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of the letter aspect, it's all junk mail.
Yeah.
And jail mail too. That's a big one. Mm-hmm. Mail from jail. They're the only people that are writing letters anymore.
Jail mail. Okay.
They're the only people writing letters anymore. There is cards. There's plenty of correspondence via cards and things of that nature still. But the biggest uptick is medication for people.
Right.
Shut-in type people, and Amazon, of course. We're actually almost at a freight level now as far as boxes we're bringing to whatever destinations that they go to. It's incredible, and that's really where the volume is.
Yeah.
And I think the future of the post office is going to be those small packages, because the UPSs of the world and the FedEx, they don't want to handle that.
Yeah.
We're going to get that. Yeah. And we're still the last mile for all of them. FedEx, Amazon, UPS. they don't go. I wouldn't say I'm in a rural area, but definitely I'm not in a. It's a suburban, I'd say.
Right.
It's a small town.
Yeah.
And it's there are rural areas that surround it.
Yeah. We talked about this. I was a rural route carrier for a while.
It's pretty cool.
For a couple of years.
Pretty
Yeah.
cool. Pretty cool.
Ever
Hi,
feel
Max.
like going postal?
Early on when you arrive in the place, the learning curve is almost straight up. You have to, I mean, and and plus they give you about 65 hours a week minimum.
Yeah.
So you're always straight out. You're always hectic, running crazy. You wait for the day that you make regular and you get your own route.
Right.
And then you're home.
Yeah.
And then you can point your routes. You begin to form relationships with customers that are deep, maybe even everlasting.
Right.
And that's the part I like right now. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm ensconced in my own route. I've had it for 6 years.
Uh-huh.
And they all love me.
Good.
So
Good.
it works out great.
Say hi to Max again one more time.
Hi, Maxwell. And Isaac. I have to say hi to Isaac, too.
Okay. I kind of spoke over that. Mike, thanks for coming here. Appreciate it. All right. So we're going to put a bow on another match, Emily.
Yeah, I think this was, well, I'm not going to count this as a regular number because this is like a live experience, but I think this would be like 27
Right.
or something like that. We've been doing this for about 2.5 years now or something like that. We're having a good run.
You were really good today, I got to say, by the way.
Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent job.
I wanted to do a good job for you. So.
Excellent job. Catbird seat. So, Chatlandia, thank you very much virtually. And
Hi, Chatlandia.
we'll see you on Monday. We're taking tomorrow night off. Right now, we're going to eat dinner and we're going to party. So, good night.
Bye, guys.